Hi, welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Laura Dodd, the head book buyer, and I am joined today by L.R Lam, to talk about Dragonfall. So, hi, welcome to Forbidden Planet TV, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
today.
thank you for having me.
For many
Yes,
beautiful.
it's a wall of dragons, which is amazing.
Dragonfall. What's it like to kind of see it in all its glory? You know?
It's a bit overwhelming, really. I mean, I've got gold foil. That's lovely. It's very shiny.
But you can tell you've made it when you've got the got the sweet foil on. So, what can you tell us about Dragonfall without too many spoilers? Because obviously it's recently come out. So
Very recently, yes. So it's about a world where long ago humans and dragons used to be bonded. Your kind of classic human rider situation, fighting a mysterious evil. But then humans, being humans, betrayed dragons, stole their magic, and banished them to a dying world. But humans have short lives and short memories, and so in the intervening centuries they've forgotten what they did, and they now worship dragons as gods. But the dragons live for a very long time and are very good at holding a grudge. So my little kind of short thing is the dragon gods remember and they do not forgive. Yeah, and so then we've got the last male dragon, who's been kind of foretold to be the chosen one, but so far he's not doing a great job at it. He keeps trying to scry and get some visions of how to save the dragons, and nothing's working. You're not allowed in this world to read the prophecies because the last male dragon went mad, but he decides to sneak in and steal one anyway, and that sets everything in motion. He falls into the human world and finds himself bonded to a human, half bonded. And this human is a gender-fluid thief who's determined to get revenge on the powers that be and prove that their grandsire did not bring in the plague that killed a bunch of people in the world. And so, yes, they reluctantly have to work together, and the dragon needs to bond with the human and complete it, steal the magic, and kill them. But then emotions. That's complicated.
The emotions happen. The feels happen. So.
Yes.
And is this going to, so obviously there's been a few kind of, I suppose, author-inspired tattoos from recent books. So Hannah Gaynor, for example, with her fab tattoo. So are you going to be getting a Dragonfall inspired?
Yeah, I'm planning to get a dragon tattoo. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to do it sooner or when the trilogy is complete. And I'm still trying to decide how big of a dragon and where exactly to put it. The options are either a giant one on my thigh or a little one around my ankle, with like the wing kind of going up the side, so I'm thinking I might do that one.
That'd be cool. I suppose if you did get the one on the thigh, you could have kind of like cut out like leggings and stuff. That really show that off.
It's true. I'm not sure if I would do that though. We'll see.
It's an option.
Yeah.
So we are now officially in our Sexy Dragons era. Where did you start with this book? The characters and the world are both exquisite, especially Arcady. But yes, so where did you start?
It weirdly did not start with dragons. It started with the stone seals. So the humans in this world have these little stone seals that are carved with the symbols of their identity, and it helps them funnel their magic, and it's also a way for the Citadel to basically track everyone if they need to, in a creepy surveillance state style. And Arcady cannot use their seal for anything because it would immediately kind of alert the powers that be to the fact that there's still an Aramea who's alive. They can still use magic, but they couldn't say sign their name to anything, get a job on the straight and narrow. They're kind of locked out of society. But Arcady has found a way to get a new seal and a new identity, so that's where their journey begins. And I got inspired by seeing Assyrian seals, which are carved, and it was usually how you'd sign things by rolling it in clay. And there was a plaque, oh no, this broke. Oh. There was a sign that said sometimes they considered them like magical amulets, so that was only the initial inspiration, and I kind of jumped from there. And then much later I realized, okay, well if humans stole the magic, I now have an excuse to write my dragon book, which I've been wanting to do for ages, and I found my angle on dragons, which was evidently making them hot.
Yep. That's for me. And how does the process differ for you from kind of solo writing to, obviously, for example, writing with Elizabeth May for the kind of the space opera stuff?
Yeah, so we wrote Seven Devils and Seven Mercies together, and the benefit of co-writing is that you're not quite in it alone, and if you get really stuck, you can kind of work it out with people, and it's the only time ever where, like, you wake up and the writing fairies have arrived, because Elizabeth liked to write late at night, and I was a morning person, so I'd wake up and have my coffee and be like, what has Elizabeth written? And that was quite fun. Whereas this one, yeah, it was, you know, more of a solo endeavor, and it had been the first time I'd written solo stuff for a little while, so it was kind of finding my way back into my own process. And this one was very, like, organic. Every time I tried to plan it, it would kind of slither away from me, so I eventually had to just lean into the chaos, which as an anxious perfectionist control freak was very fun. But I got there in the end, and I'm really proud of the end product.
And are you there for a planner, and do you have like reams and reams of notes? And...
I usually do a color-coded spreadsheet.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm that person. But I do still have like 100-page world-building document for this one,
Wow.
and quite a few things like that. So I still, you know, was my over studious self around the edges, but yeah, just sort of had to figure out what the story wanted to be and bow to it.
Yes. I suppose you could always potentially do some fun with the notes, you know, like doing like maps later on.
Yeah, well, I have a map in here, which is amazing, and I actually made a little world building booklet that people who pre-ordered could claim. So at some point, maybe down the line, I might upload that, because it kind of explained a little bit more about the magic system. It had a glossary, that sort of thing.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And obviously we have to kind of touch on the fantastic representation in your book. We have obviously sign language, there's gender fluid characters. So how important is that inclusion for you?
Yeah, I think like my whole backlist is usually quite diverse, and I have a lot in particular about gender and sexuality. Since I myself am bisexual and non-binary, it's really important for me. And growing up, like I read loads and loads of fantasy, but there are very few kind of gender fluid or queer characters, and the ones I found I like clung to without quite realizing why. Like the Fool in Robin Hobb is like one of the OGs, and I read Vaniel, Magic's Pawn by Mercedes Lackey, and a few of those. So a lot of epic fantasy does still kind of fall into very traditional gender roles.
Yes.
Like you can have dragons and potatoes, but but kind of restrictive gender roles. So I wanted to explore writing not just like a queer normative world, but a queer celebratory world. So in Locke, in the human world, in this part, you don't assume a stranger's gender just on how they present or by sight. So you default to they, them, and once you get to know them, they will tell you. And sometimes it is still they, them, sometimes it's he or she, and they signal that through the sign language. And it's that step from going kind of to formal to informal as well.
Yes, yeah. And as well, the kind of dual POVs as well, so it just kind of feels as if you're part of that world and kind of everyone is treated equal, which is just...
Yeah. So I had the form marry the function a bit as well, because Everin's point of view, he is a dragon, but he's writing his sections to Arcady, so it's called first person direct address. Sometimes people call it second person because it has you in it. And some people are finding that a little bit jarring or confronting because it's a less common narrative position, but I did it very deliberately so that there are very few third person pronouns for Arcady in the text, so that way it's up to the reader to kind of decide. And it's been interesting because there have been reviews who call Arcady they, some who call them he, some she, but Arcady's alright with any, but it kind of reveals more about the reader, which I thought was really cool.
Yes, yeah, very interesting. And like you said, obviously growing up with like a kid of the 80s, kid of the 90s, growing up with the fantasy that you would have, then it's obviously fantastic to see so much more kind of
I feel like we're in another golden age of fantasy recently.
Yeah.
There's so much more diversity, because I debuted in 2013, which was before even We Need Diverse Books came out, and my first book was Pantomime, which had like an intersex lead, and back then publishing was a bit like, what do we do with this? Whereas now, I published one with a non-binary lead, and it was a non-issue, which is, and they were really happy to have that representation as well, which was great.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I have to kind of touch on the importance of education, and I know obviously I suppose things like dark academia and things that are obviously huge at the moment, and it's great to read, but the kind of importance of education to Arcady in particular, Do you draw on your kind of own academic experience too?
Yeah. So in this world, there's a huge disparity of wealth. I don't know where I got that idea from. And Arcady really wants access to the university, not only to try and find out the truth, but to access knowledge, because that's, again, something that's been denied to them for a lot of reasons. And education, can open a lot of doors for them and let them live the life that they really wanted to. I come from an academic background myself. I was until recently a creative writing lecturer at Edinburgh at Napier University, and I taught creative writing, but I have now left academia to strike out and do other things. And so I have, a lot of familiarity with both like the opportunities of education, but also like the bureaucracy of it, and also in some ways how it does kind of put people into a one-size-fits-all approach. Assigning grades can be, I think, in some ways oppressive, which I thought would be interesting to investigate. So book 2 is going to focus a lot more on university things. I'm going to sneak in some good pedagogy and my feelings about academic bureaucracy, and that will be really fun. I'm excited to get to that.
I was just thinking of things like not quite as bad as like the Scholarmance, but obviously people could die if they don't quite make it out of university alive. So,
I don't think it'll be quite as like Hunger Gamesy or whatever. I will look at sort of the repercussions of who's allowed to actually get into university and who's not. Because actually, to use magic, you have to have access to a lot of energy in terms of food. And so therefore, if you are richer, you are able to access more food that you don't necessarily need to survive, and therefore you can access more magic. Whereas someone who's quite poor and can barely afford to feed themselves, they're not going to be using magic even if they have the great capability to it. And it's also a world where one type of magic might be more innate to you, but you can learn more through study. So again, people who can access education access more power, both literally and figuratively.
So we can look at as well the Great Banton, the scenes between Arcady and Everin. Like, how do you keep the tension going, and what are your kind of favourite examples of kind of other enemies to lovers in books?
Yeah. I had so much fun with this because they're kind of forced together. Like, I love the forced proximity trope, which I played around with this one. And I also added another layer to it that they can't physically touch without it causing pain to one of them, which was all sorts of fun. And especially it resulted in slow burn romance to the nth degree. I really liked them having very different approaches to things, because Everin is unsurprisingly a very haughty dragon, haughty in both senses of the word, and he's a dragon prince as well, so he has this like superiority complex, but knows not that much about the human world and is kind of reliant on Arcady for that as well. And Arcady is annoyed to have to work with this incredibly attractive stranger. So they'll kind of butt heads and kind of, tease each other and stuff. And at first it's more antagonistic, and then it becomes a bit more teasing. They eventually get closer and stuff, as well as they slowly lower their defenses. Of course, whenever anyone asks me, like, name other enemies to lovers, I suddenly forget every book I have ever read in my life. So I can't think of an example right now. But I do love it. It's like my catnip of tropes. And as soon as this is over, I'll be like, oh yeah, that book I should have said.
We'll insert. We'll think here. So what can you tell us about the next book, and will there be more Soren involved?
Yes, so book 2 is Magic University. And yes, there will be more Soren, but I can say no more than that.
Okay.
Soren is the hot assassin priest with great biceps and a little mini pet dragon named Jaculus, who I love.
There's so much to unpack there. And to kind of finish off for today, because obviously we've got to get all these lovely books signed as well. What are you currently reading, playing, and watching?
Yeah, so I'm currently reading Magician's Guild by Trudy Canavan, which passed me by when it first came out. So I thought I would go back to it. I was talking about it with Harveen from Goldsboro, and because we were talking about our favorite books growing up while I was signing the books there. And she mentioned that one, and I was like, oh yeah, I never got around to that. So yeah, I'm currently reading that, which is really fun. And then I just bought Gwen and Art Are Not in Love because I was like, that scratch off marketing worked and the proof for me. And then a friend of mine, L.D. Lipinski, really loved it, and I really trust their taste. So that'll be up next. Watching, I'm not watching that much just now. We're kind of working our way through Succession.
Right.
And I think that's about it just now.
Yes.
And then what was the last one?
I don't. Do you game?
No, I don't actually. No. I've deliberately not, because I know I would get really, really into it, and I do not have time because I need to write books. But I have, like, the closest I've gotten is I've started watching Critical Role, which is good fun. Yes. I started with the one shot that Stephen Colbert was in, which was really fun. Yes. And my friend is actually opening a board game shop in Leith, near where I live in Edinburgh, called Ancient Robot Games. So a shout out to his shop, which is opening this month.
Oh my god, I was up in Edinburgh in January, so I might have to go.
Yeah. It should open imminently, and I'm very excited. So I'm like, he can help guide me more into board games and stuff.
Yes, yeah. There's loads of places to explore in London, but there's one in East London called Tanuki Gaming, and you can book a table. They have so many games there, and the staff are super knowledgeable. So you could be like, oh, I've got 4 people, we've got an hour. What would you suggest?
Yeah, that's great.
And the food's really good.
Nice.
So, which helps. But yeah, thank you so much, Elle, for joining us today. And obviously we will be seeing you at MCM very soon, so there'll be even more signed copies. So, but for everyone watching at home, signed copies will be available on forbiddenplanet.com. And yes, we'll see you soon. Bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.